We're doing this.
We're doing
Welcome to The Tangent.
Yeah.
This is The Tangent. I'm Father Sam Kachuba, joined by Matt Sperrazza.
That's me.
This is basically just going to be us talking for a while. And the idea is we're diving into things Catholic. We're diving into people Catholic who we have known or have met or who we've seen from a distance doing great things.
Right.
And we're just going to let the conversation happen.
Yeah, and I was going to pop in there with a joke about being critical of others, but that's not true. Yeah.
I'm glad that you're not just going to be critical of everyone who we talk to.
Yeah. We bring on guests and just roast them.
Yeah. I mean, it could be kind of fun, but I don't think that it would really do well for our trying to foster an environment of charity and love.
Right. In terms of evangelization, not the best of moves.
It's weird. There's the saying, you attract more flies with honey. There's something to that, right?
That might be the first time I've ever heard that phrase.
Used correctly, or
right, fair enough.
Or just the first time ever at all. You've never heard
I do this thing where I will mix up axioms, So I would take that. Renee makes fun of me all the time with this. Renee's my wife, for those of you who do not know her. Which hopefully is
so it's pretty serious, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty serious, yeah. Pretty serious and pretty new. Just got married. That's pretty
totally
cool.
Likes you. Congratulations.
She totally does. Thank you. No, but I would have been like, you catch more flies with molasses. Actually, it's more like, but I don't do it on purpose, but it's more like I confuse axioms. Is it an axiom?
Sure.
Yeah, I confuse
them. In that case, what it is it's called a malapropism.
Wow, that's a big word.
Tell
me about it.
Can
you spell it?
It means malaprop, malaprop, and then
ism, ISM,
an ism on there if you really mix it up. Yeah.
That's right. Got you.
Yeah, there we go. So here's the thing.
I'm a teacher.
I was reading the other day, and I was thinking about you actually as I read this because you're a newlywed, and as you've gotten your married life started now, just a couple weeks in. I was reading this thing by Father Benedict Rochelle, and he writes that when we think about marriage, there's sort of first the initial developmental level that we come at marriage with is sort of the romantic ideal of marriage. Mm-hmm. So we see sort of the love story of marriage, and it's really an exciting thing, and we read about that, and that's how we think as children, right? Every little kid thinking about marriage is usually thinking in terms of some romantic ideal. Right. And then as you get older and you actually get into relationships and you grow a little bit more as a person, you come to understand that there's more than just the romantic part.
Right.
But very often, especially for married couples, the romantic part, they can start to focus more on the realities and sort of lose the romantic part. And he says, so it's really interesting that the place where a lot of marriage renewal has taken place, things like Worldwide Marriage Encounter, was started by celibates. It was started by priests who are not married. And he said part of that is because priests tend to hang on to the romantic ideal of marriage a lot longer, even though in their ministry they work with people who are struggling in marriages or who might have different issues. They'll hang on to the romantic ideal a lot longer. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, I mean, if you look at, I think it's John Paul II. I think he is the one who said this, where it was in response to this critique that how could a priest help someone with marriage? And he basically said, I hear men and women in confession. He's like it wasn't nearly as boastful as it might sound coming out of my mouth, and it's like you would have no idea the insight I have. You know what I mean? But he basically was like, but he basically said I have tremendous insight into both of these realms, into which is so unexpected. This insight into womanhood, as a celibate male priest, Yeah. But he really does. And so I guess two questions. Well, one question and then a further comment. Do you experience that as a priest? And then before I forget, I also love the idea of being attracted to certain vocations based off the aesthetic of it, like that being the entranceway in. Like the first reason I was like, I want to marry Renee was because I was like, Renee's really pretty. you know, and that's very shallow, albeit true, you know, but like not the same as I would.
You heard it here first, folks. Matt is shallow.
But you know what I mean, you know?
Yeah,
And it's
no,
like
right,
the
right.
idea, like I've heard a priest say, like, it was in an episode of, I think, Pints with Aquinas. Father Boniface Hicks said, like, any priest, any young man that says, "Oh, I want to be a Benedictine or a Dominican," but is like mostly attracted to the habit at first. It's like, yeah, that's fine. It's the same thing, just different, you know? And so it's not surprising to me that celibate people would have such insight, you know? That can be very
I think
wise.
both things are. I think both things are true, right? So I grew up in the context of a really beautiful marriage. My parents and the way that they lived out their marriage and still live it out. It's not that they're still alive,
Right.
the way my parents live out their marriage is something that's really beautiful, and it's an example that I get to see every day. Or
Right.
they live in Virginia now, so I don't get to see it every day, but you know what I mean, right? It's something that you grow up seeing. So you sort of see the beauty of marriage, and you see a little bit of the romance as well, and that gives you kind of the understanding. But then, as a priest, for sure, hearing confessions or just being in a context of working with married couples, you gain an insight into what's going on. It's not the firsthand experience, which is a tremendous teacher. Firsthand experience is always a tremendous way to learn. But it's a different form. It's just a different form of learning and understanding. And this is why in seminary they're so big on cultivating a listening heart, helping your guys in seminary to really learn how to listen to what's being said, and even to listen to what's not being said. When you start to hear what's not being said, that can often give you some insight into what might be going on or what might be happening in the heart of the person who's talking to you. It's interesting you bring up John Paul II talking about confession, though, and how that gives him an insight. Because if you ever read G.K. Chesterton, the Father Brown Mysteries,
I've never read
those?
Father Brown. I read Orthodoxy, and
Okay. Oh, good.
admittedly was just very confused by the concept of magic in it. But I got some nuggets out of it. I really like the last line of that book, actually. But that's
Chesterton's powerful because he's able to do some sentence constructions that no longer are things that we're capable of in the English language. The way he puts things, he's just got a great way of phrasing stuff. But we've kind of lost that art of writing. But
Yeah.
in the Father Brown Mysteries, and the Father Brown Mysteries, he created this character, Father Brown, who is
very surprising.
go figure, the title character, right? He's this Catholic priest who somehow ends up always in the heart of some murder mystery. And if not a murder mystery, then some sort of a robbery mystery. And it's always Father Brown doing the mystery solving. And there's a whole series of these stories. They're kind of like Catholic Sherlock Holmes.
Cool.
And there's
Yeah.
something really cool about him. Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
But
when I
there's-
read Sherlock Holmes, that's what I thought was missing. That one aspect. I said he should be a
Catholicism?
priest.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this one of the stories. There's a criminal named Flambeau. I'm pretty sure it's Flambeau. Anyway, he's a French criminal, and he's been stealing things. And Brown finally corners him, but he does it like secretly in the coat check at a restaurant.
Okay.
And so he like catches him in there and forces, quote unquote, forces him to go to confession. And it's this really wild scene where he goes, "How did you know?" And he's in years spent hearing confessions, I've come to understand the human person in a very profound way. So much so that even outside of confession, I can hear in people's voices and in their heart, in the things that they're saying or the things that they're not saying, what might be troubling them.
Sure.
And it's simply because I've become a student of the human person. I thought that was interesting because every once in a while we get kind of esoteric with it, right? We think, oh, it's this somehow I've got a divine way of seeing things and understanding things. And it's not that we don't want the divine way of seeing things and understanding things, but like somehow God gave me this gift and now I can read your soul and I know everything there is to know about you.
Right. Do you experience that?
No, far more often it's you become a student of the human person. Now, there are some moments, I won't pretend like it doesn't happen, where you experience like this moment of inspiration where say this thing.
Right.
And these words, that's what's going to help this person right now.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, it's you spend enough time around people, talking to people, listening to them, kind of getting to know their lives. and that will give you some insight into who they are, and because in a certain way, like as a priest, I'm detached from it. I'm the third party watching, looking in. I'm the person observing from the outside, kind of hopefully objectively. I don't know,
Right.
but I'm that
Right.
person on the outside looking in, and with that insight, I'm able to maybe offer something that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. Yeah.
That's awesome. I've two things. I've never heard a priest describe it as the third party on the outside looking in. I've never heard that. In those words, because it's so often like anytime I've talked to a priest about their hearing confession, the way that we've discussed it is that like they've said like, oh, I don't remember anything, or it's a grace to not remember something. But I've never heard of it as like total, like, I mean, the way it sounds coming from your mouth is like you're totally detached from it. And so the idea that like these specific words are to be said is like,
Right.
that's like the real, I mean, it's always real, right? But in persona Christi, right? In the sacrament, Christ is working through you. And so that's really cool. It's cool to hear it described that way, having already believed it, from like a scriptural and theological standpoint, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of times when people ask us priests about confessions, we'll talk about not remembering things, and that's true. Like, there's tons of things in the confessional that I forget.
Right.
I
Do
don't
you
remember a
pray
lot
for
of
that?
things, and I have certainly prayed for it, and I've found that more often than not, it's just become sort of a default.
Right.
It just
Right.
happens, and again, there's a huge grace in that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Like,
And the
what a
grace is,
gift. What a gift.
yeah. Well, because honestly, I don't need to remember. I don't need to hang on to all your sins. I got my own to deal with.
Right.
Right. So it's actually better for me if I can forget what you confessed in your own confession, because then I've got, as a priest, I've got my own moral failings that I need to bring to the Lord for mercy.
Right. Do
And
do
it
you
just
ever?
it also lets me. I was gonna say it also lets me interact with people.
Right. Right. I mean,
Outside of the confessional work.
Right.
I'm literally not thinking about whatever was said in
Right.
confession.
Right. Which is very
because,
good.
Well,
Yeah.
I would
what
say
a way to
about
stagnate
95%
your
of the people who-
shepherdhood. You know.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think about 95% of the people who come to confession with me here, anyway, at least probably come anonymously. It's
Right.
rare at this
Right.
point that there's like face-to-face stuff, which is honestly, that's great.
Right.
The
Yeah.
anonymity is both for the priest and for the person, right?
Do
It's,
you
it's not
prefer
just so
it
that
that
you can
way?
be anonymous. Honestly, I find it really helpful. There are certain situations where, like, especially if somebody's dealing with some major stuff and they, in addition to needing to confess their sins, they also need some counsel through it.
Right.
Then a face-to-face environment can be really helpful. But what the screen does is it reminds me of my office in that moment, that I am here as Christ, and I'm here to be an instrument of Christ for this person, to be an instrument of God's mercy to them. My job is not for this to be an interpersonal exchange,
Right.
in the sense of Father Sam dealing with this person.
Right.
Although I can't help but bring my own personality into it.
Right.
The whole point is actually that I'm here for this person, to help them to confess their sins, to receive God's mercy. And really, that's the primary goal. And by being on the other side of the screen, it helps me to focus more on what my particular role is. It also forces me to listen more carefully,
Wow.
because I can't see their face. So I've got to listen more to what they're saying.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot in that time of just really, really listening to people. I saw a commercial for, there was some reality TV show where couples were dating, but through a wall.
Yeah.
So they never actually
Yeah, I've
saw
heard
each
of
other.
it.
They were just set up on these,
Yeah.
and I saw this commercial, and I was like, I'd clean up on that game, which sounds like a really weird thing to say, but I'm like, yeah, no, I know how to listen and
Right.
to hear what's going on, and I know
I
how to
listen to
how to
people
not
speak
see
through
somebody's
walls all
face
the
and ask the
time.
right question. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, but of course it's better that I'm not on things like that. It's better.
You could make the argument it would be better for everybody if nobody was on games like that.
For sure better for
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, look, if we can get away from reality TV, we're doing something good for ourselves.
Do you know the game, not the game, well, the show, Squid Game? Have you ever heard of it?
Is that the thing on Netflix or something?
I haven't seen it.
It's like a murder show.
Yeah, basically. It's basically like people, the premise, I mean, it sounds terrible. Again, I've never seen the show, but like, I feel like you can make certain objective claims about television shows before you see them. Like, for example, this is not Squid Game. There's a show called Lucifer, and in this show, Lucifer is the good guy. And so anytime any student has ever come up to me and been like, "Have you seen this show?" I'm like, "No, and you shouldn't watch it. That's terrible. This is going to be so
I think that's good
confusing
advice.
for you." You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
but Squid Game has the premise is basically like there's a group of people who are in need of money. They are in dire need of money for whatever reason it is, and they go to this Squid Game. And it's to compete for money, and they think it's my understanding is they think it's normal at first, but then it turns out that they're going to literally compete to the death. And when they find that out after the first round, where like a bunch of people die, you know, they're like, "You can leave, and then you can come back if you want." And they've like the main character leaves and then comes back or something like that, right? But the whole point is that it's like a last man standing fight to the death for the entertainment of the rich people. Which I'm sure is there's an attempt at a political commentary there. But my understanding is they're making a real Squid Game. This is a thing that Netflix wants to do. It's not going to be fight to the death, you know, but it's like 500 people are...
Let's hope
right,
not.
but it's like 500 people go into a room and then the winner gets $10 million, you know? And it's basically a last man standing, you know, for $10 million. And I'm thinking this, and I'm like, this is like barbaric. You know what I mean? We talked about this. The show is called Tangent for a reason, because this has literally nothing to do with Confession.
Right, exactly.
But like, I don't know why I thought of it.
But here's the thing. This is where I'm going now, because you started talking about them putting a show in development, and this has been on my mind for a while. I don't think it's come out yet, but the Rings of Power.
It has. It hasn't come out yet, but I know what you're talking about.
It hasn't come out, but it's coming up. So it's this Amazon.
It is
I think?
Amazon.
Yeah, they're doing an adaptation of the Silmarillion, and it's supposed to be it's supposed to go along with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and everything. And I don't know. I haven't. First, I should state clearly, I have not read the Silmarillion in its entirety, and as a huge Tolkien fan, I'm a little embarrassed by that. Like, ashamed of myself for not having gotten enough into Tolkien canon. I've read the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit a million times, but I've not finished the Silmarillion.
Times?
Yeah, I don't think I'm not literally 1 million times. Anyway, I think I'm maybe a quarter of the way through the Silmarillion. I got a lot of work to do, but I'm just seeing this adaptation coming, and I keep hearing these little whisperings here and there that it's not going to be that good, or that they're bringing in stuff, and I'm so nervous. Like, I thought they did a great job with the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah, I agree. And
even there, I'm picky enough that I can say, yeah, but they kind of missed out on some major things, which would have made the movies 5 hours long each instead of just 3.5 hours long.
Tom Bombadil's not in it. You know, like, that's the big...
Exact. Tom Bombadil's not in it. Sauron dies on the wheel instead of actually escaping, and there's no scouring of the Shire.
Yeah.
These are all things that I think are really important for the movie. Anyway, I think all those things are important. I think what they did with The Hobbit was inexcusable, stretching it into 3 movies and bringing in characters that didn't exist from the book. That was just silly. It didn't need to happen.
But they really wanted to make money.
I watched the first Hobbit movie and then refused to watch the rest. Yeah, they did. And they do over-reliance on CGI, whereas the first one, they did such a great job getting all the prosthetic masks for the orcs and everything. It was fantastic. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I'm just really finding myself in a place where I don't trust what they're doing with the Rings of Power, and I'm nervous about it. And then I saw something the other day that said, this is me when I realized that if the Rings of Power isn't everything I hoped it would be, I don't have to watch it. And I realized, oh yeah, I don't have to watch And this is the thing, all right? Because you just said it as advice that you give to your students if they're talking to you about a TV show or something that they think might be interesting, and you can just say, even without having seen it, that sounds like a bad show. Don't watch it.
Right.
Sometimes we've got to be able to say that. Like there are some things that we can know by the name of it or by the description of it. This isn't going to be good for
Right.
me, and I shouldn't get into it. And
Is it
that's
called-
that's how we fall into sin,
Is it
right?
called American Pie? ... Don't watch it.
We fall into sin real easily because we think, oh, that seems interesting. I know it sounds bad also, but I'll watch
Right.
it anyway.
Right.
Like sometimes we just have to know ourselves. We got to know what we're dealing with and what the world is like,
Right.
and we're going to
And-
be okay.
and
But
to be fair,
sometimes the better thing is to just hold back.
Sometimes it's easy, right? Sometimes it is easy, but sometimes it's quite difficult to discern these things. For example, to stick with the Rings of Power, right? There were rumors that they were going to incorporate nudity into this TV show. And
Okay.
when I heard that, I was aghast. No, I was pretty ticked off.
Well, you
Because
should
I was
because
like,
there's none in anything that Tolkien
right.
wrote.
And that honestly, I mean, you can't, I think at least, you can't have an expectation of everybody else to meet Catholic social teaching because they're not Catholic. You know what I mean? But
True,
based off
yeah.
the fact that Tolkien, who is like, I mean, to call him a powerhouse Catholic might be an exaggeration, but like he's a well-known Catholic figure who is actually Orthodox. You know what I mean? And so it's like, talk about spitting on the guy's grave if you were to do that, you know? Now I have since done some research on this because I want to watch the show. I want to at least try it out, you know? And my understanding is the nudity will be in a situation where like it's done in the same way as if they had shown nudity in a movie about Nazism and concentration camps, right? It's like to show horror. And this is a conversation that I have pretty frequently of like, well, what is acceptable to see in a movie, you know? Because I personally am of the opinion that like there's never ever any need to show anybody's like naked body in a film. I just don't think it's necessary. If you had to show like these two people had sex, it's like, okay, well, I can get the idea from hints, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't
Context
like
clues.
I wasn't
can
born
tell you about
yesterday,
that, yeah.
you know? And if that's somehow essential to the story, which many stories it is, you know what I mean? It's like, well, you can show it without having me, you know, needing me to see this other person who has dignity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's rare that the explicit content does much
To
to
further the
the
story.
plot.
It's so rare. But
right? Like explicit sexual content rarely furthers the plot, so we can just avoid
right.
it.
But with
okay with that.
this type of situation, right? And I'm curious, you know what I mean? Where it is like it's to show the horror of let's forget Rings of Power. It's to show the horror of a concentration camp. You know what I mean? Well, you know what? Maybe
Yeah.
I'm sure that's something that was done at concentration camps. I'm sure they were, you know, stripped naked and beaten and you know, and if it's to show this is the horror of this ideology, you know what I mean? Like, I could see how
so
the Lord letting
if
someone
you see
see
something
evil
like
would bring about a good.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah, if you see something like Schindler's List,
I haven't seen
the
seen
movie
Schindler's
Amistad.
List. Schindler's
So Schindler's
can't
List
say
is a beautiful
Right.
movie. It's very powerful. It's disturbing
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, but really I think a very powerful film. And then you've got something like Amistad, which is about the slave ship that actually ended up in New Haven,
Okay.
Connecticut. There's nudity in it, but it's in the context of the concentration camp, in the context of chattel
Right.
slavery. And what it does is it actually moves your heart
Right.
to deep pity and reverence for the
Mm-hmm.
victims. So instead of it being something that's titillating or that's just for some kind of prurient
Right.
reason, it's actually something that gets you. It moves you to a sense of pity. So in that case, it is serving a purpose. It's not a gratuitous thing, nor is it something that's impure. This at the
Right.
same time, I don't think it's
Right.
necessary.
And that's
but there's in a context like that, and that's kind of taking it a step to like a more deeply developed conscience and to a higher level of thinking
Right.
about things. In general, like I'm not going to say to a kid, hey, it's fine for you to watch this movie,
Right.
because it really gives you a deep insight into the victims of war or slavery or
Right.
hatred. Like, no, don't watch this. It's
And
too much
and
for
I
you.
think it
In the
would.
same way that I'm not going to like let kids watch certain TV shows,
Right. And
right? Because it's
I
not good
think it
for
would
them.
depend on the person as well. There's got to be the personal aspect. And I've talked about this before on another one of Veritas's show, Restless. How someone,
Is that the first time we had to shout out a show on
yeah, maybe it
Veritas?
is. I don't know.
Is that the first
Yeah,
one we
yeah.
did? All right, Restless, great. Can we have them on as guests?
Yeah, why not?
Like the whole Restless crew. We'll just
Yeah,
get them all
all
in.
18 of them.
Talk
No.
to
Do I have to be a cast member there or here? Both? I don't know.
We'll let you switch on
Right,
and off.
we have them in one other room.
But you have to change hats. We're going to
I'm
give you
like
an
in here,
actual
and then
hat that you have to
I'm
wear.
in here, and then I run over there, and I change hats.
Yeah.
I answer my own
exactly.
question. Basically, like, what I was gonna say is it depends on the person, because say you are an individual, and I can speak to this myself, right? Like, was
I am an individual, actually. It's amazing.
no, I was gonna say, I used to be, and think, through God's grace have been lifted of it, but was heavily addicted to pornography at one point, and so seeing nudity in a film is something that I have avoided like the plague, since being freed from that terrible affliction. And it really was. It was awful, and so it depends. Like you said, you would never advise it to a kid. Well, I wouldn't advise it to like a teenage boy, period. You know what I mean? Like, in particular, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
there is never an excuse for any man under the age of like 21. You know what I mean? And even that, it's like, that's a stretch. Depends on where they are.
And even then, no, you're right.
know?
You're absolutely right. Well, and that's so that coming back to confession then, right? And to the point of confession, there are so many times when somebody's struggling with a sin of some sort. It depends on who the person is, how you're going to advise them to deal with it, right? Somebody who's never really experienced this particular sin before might be confused. Like, how did I fall into this? How did I get to this point? Because that's so often that's the response to sin, right? It's not like, oh, I've been desperate to do this for a really long time, and I finally had the chance to commit this sin, and then I realized it was a sin, and I shouldn't have done it, and I felt bad. No, most of the time, somebody falls into a sin that they've never committed before, and they come with this deep grief that they fell into it, and they're struggling to understand how it happened. But maybe there's somebody who has struggled with that sin repeatedly. That person needs a lot less explanation for how it happened.
Right.
And a lot more in the way of compassion, right? So you start to what's happening with a person and how they've how they're dealing with these different things, all the stuff that can be going into it. The good news in the end is always that God is the one who's merciful, and He's going to take care of us, right? And that's the ultimate end of all
Right.
of it.
I mean, I say before, like, I've been freed by God's grace. Well, confession was a massive, part of that. I received the grace of the Lord through confession repeatedly, in an amount that it's almost like in an amount that I'm not proud of, but I have to boast about, because it's the Lord's grace. You know what I mean? Isn't that St. Paul? He says, right, I only boast in my sufferings. I only boast in like basically his downfalls in order to boast in the grace of the Lord.
Right.
And that's why I've come to this point where I try not to. I mean, there was a point where I was terribly ashamed of it, and I mean, I do still feel shame for the sin, but in a different way. I look on it now and I say that was a thing I did that was wrong, but God has saved me. Whereas before it was this unhealthy shame, and I've come to learn about shame through John Paul's teaching on it, how it's actually a gift. So.
Well, all right, ready for this? So we've gone on a whole bunch of different directions here. We're going to bring it back now to that idea of romance. All right, we're going to bring it back to that romance in the beginning.
Before we do that, though,
yeah,
we gotta split. If you want to catch the rest, where you gotta go? To the podcast, right?
Well, we're going to the podcast. That's right.
Going to the
Yeah,
podcast.
catch the tangent as a podcast. Where, Matt? Anywhere you get your podcasts?
Anywhere you get your podcasts. I was like, is there an answer to that question?
Okay. Well, then, this is the tangent of a production of Veritas Catholic Network. Join us next week when we figure out how to go out.
That was good.
I had so much more to say. Just this one little thing. Right? Bringing it all back to the idea of romance, right? Whatever struggle we have, the romance of God towards his people. The romance of God towards his people is that he desires the relationship with us no matter what. And so when we understand that this is a God who's pursuing us, right? Like Catholic dating world right now, it's always like, I just want a guy who's going to pursue me.
Right.
Or discerning pursuing this girl or not. It's like just all this idea of, but that's a romantic idea, and there's a reason for that romantic idea, because the pursuit, it's divine. That's what God does with us.
Right.
He pursues us, and we see it in Revelation. We see how God does this with the people of Israel, pursuing them in everything, and every time they're unfaithful to him, still pursuing them and calling them back out of love. And then we start to understand the depth of what that romance is, the divine romance for his people, God loving us and desiring to be in that relationship with us. And see, we can get caught up in the practicality. That's where the shame comes in. Right? I did this thing, and now I'm ashamed. Now I'm kind of living in this dark place where I'm sad because of what I've done and what I'm struggling with. But when we remember the divine romance and what God is doing, it's that pursuit that he's coming towards us, that he's always inviting us back. He's always entering into that relationship with us. The more we enter into that relationship, the more we're being healed and built up and formed and taken in new directions. We need to remember that romance. So I think in the same way that a married couple might start to get a little bit just caught up in the practicalities and the day-to-day routine stuff of marriage and kind of lose the romance, and it's the priests who come in and remind them of the romance. In a similar way, it's the priest's job to remind people of the romance with God. But this is where I'd flip it around. Because what is it that brings priests back to their knees to pray? What is it that brings priests back to like a revival of the spiritual life? Every single time I've experienced that is because I've fallen into the routine of parish ministry, the routine of priestly ministry, doing like daily mass and then getting up and going and doing this thing and this thing and this thing. And then it's sitting down and hearing from a lay person about their experience in prayer. Something that they experienced when they went on retreat, some way that God spoke to them, and realizing that these people are entering into the romance of a relationship with God that I've too easily forgotten about. And what an amazing gift it is.
It's something, I mean, listen, I've been married for what, like 3 weeks and a day? So it's been like 15. It's been
Way
like
to go, buddy.
It's been
Way
like
to
15,
go.
20 minutes, But even in this very short period of time, and to be fair, I'm trying to pay attention to it. You know what I mean? I have noticed, right, that this it's something that I always struggled to I don't know how to actualize maybe. I understood it in my head. It was like, yeah, the eros one feels is a mirror of the way you should feel about God. You know what I mean? That's like those two things are deeply intertwined. And it was only after getting married and perhaps being willing to indulge it. You know what I mean? Being willing to indulge like the eros that I feel, that attraction I feel towards Renee. Was I like, oh my gosh, this is how I'm supposed to feel about the Eucharist? Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Wow,
I had no idea this deep yearning was how it's supposed to be. And I intellectually knew that, oh, I'm supposed to yearn for the Eucharist. You know what I mean? But it wasn't it wasn't deep in my heart, And it was only after taking that deep yearning for my wife that I was like, oh my gosh. And that's how the Lord feels about me, except even more. This is a shadow of that. So it's like, Of course, something that's also really cool about that is it's something that is very specific to my vocation, and so quickly specific to my vocation that I was like, wow, I see how the Lord brought me here too, you know? Like I'm already seeing that, you know? And so
Sure.
what a grace that was too. But I guess now when I think of
Beautiful.
right that romantic aspect, I mean Christopher West says it all the time, right? What's the point of the gospel? God wants to marry you. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like wow, but even
Right.
that didn't register considering the fact that I hadn't been married. You know what I mean? And I don't know. So that's just a cool thing from the past, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and it's interesting. I remember reading a story of a guy who he and his wife the Sunday after I think they got married on a Friday, went on their honeymoon, and then Sunday found the church in town
Right.
and went to mass, and he wrote this reflection about going to mass for the first time as a married man. And he said, "I've never understood the words, 'This is my body, which is given up for you,' in the same way. And I don't think I'll ever understand them any better than what I understand through marriage." And there's a real profound beauty in that. And it's true. Like Christ gives himself to us totally. And he gives everything for us. And he's poured out completely for us. And it's that totally free gift, and what a beautiful, beautiful gift it is. But it's instructive. The gift of the Eucharist becomes instructive for everything else that's happening. It becomes instructive for everything else that God wants to give to us. It's,
It
it's
is
pretty
incredible.
amazing. The other day we did a thing. The other day we did a thing for the kids here, for the youth group, and so they were doing slip and slide kickball.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which there's not a whole lot.
Let me know
of,
next time you play.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool to watch. These kids got way more into it than I expected.
Notice that
just
I said play
extraordinarily
and not
enthusiastic.
watch.
Yeah,
I said play.
I very much stood on the sidelines to just see this unfold. But they were so into it, and at one point they're just, I don't know what came over all of them, but they were really all very passionately involved in this, encouraging one another, laughing at each other, mocking each other, all very passionately and I
Right,
think
yeah.
charitably, but it was pretty funny. And at one point, one of the boys, he's been doing this Bible study here. And in the course of the Bible study, they've brought in a little bit of theology of the body stuff. And
Sure.
he just starts screaming, "Total, faithful, fruitful, and free. Total, faithful, fruitful, and free." He's just chanting theology of the body slogans while he's out in the field waiting for a ball to get kicked to him. I'm going,
Right,
"What
right.
are you doing, man?" And he was just so into it. I'm like, okay, that's... Look,
Right.
I'm here for it. I'm glad that you know this stuff, and I'm glad that you're willing to scream it really loudly for the
Right.
entire neighborhood to hear. I think that's great.
Right,
I don't know
right.
what context you're using it in right now, because slip and slide kickball does not
Okay,
make me
I'm
think
trying
of
to
theology
figure
of
it
the
out
body.
as you speak.
But hey, there it is.
Oh, you never
No
found out?
idea. No idea. But he just did it. He went for it. No, he's just like, we talk about it all the time in Bible study, and I love it. And it's I think it was really truly just something that resonated
Right.
with him that he kept talking about. You go,
That's
okay,
beautiful.
That's cool. Go for it, man. Yeah, it's great. But see, right there, that's the other part. How often do we look at kids and think, "Oh, I don't know if they can handle this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can handle learning about this. I don't know if it's going to be okay for me to instruct them in this way, because if I do, maybe they'll get turned off, or
Yeah.
maybe they won't like something, or
I think you
whatever it
can
might
make
be."
the argument, right? I mean, we can bring it back to telling these kids, like, you shouldn't watch that, you know? I think you can make the argument that the age at which something like this should be introduced is far earlier now than it was 15, 20 years ago, because these kids are on the internet.
Oh, for sure.
It is like, I read a statistic once. I don't remember what it was. I think it was the age of, I think it was 8, right? That is the average age a child is exposed to pornography now. It's 8 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The average age is it's insanely low,
Right.
and depressingly low. So actually, this is an interesting point, because if you look right now, I think Bishop Frank might have talked about it on Let Me Be Frank. So second shout
yes.
out to another Veritas show.
And let me tell you something. We got a killer lineup.
I think Bishop Frank...
at Veritas Catholic
Yeah.
Radio Network.
and we're just really proud to be part of it.
Yeah,
let me
we
tell
are.
you. No, I think he talked about this in one of his episodes, and if he didn't talk about it, then it's something that's come up in discussions with religious ed and the Catholic schools. But the idea of finding age-appropriate ways to incorporate
Right.
the teachings of theology of the body, again, age-appropriate ways all throughout, so that we're teaching kids to respect and understand their own dignity and the dignity of others. So really simple ways of introducing anthropology, because actually I think
Right.
that's the heart
Right.
of it all. It's the anthropology. And when you have a proper theological anthropology, you're able to recognize the God-given
Right.
dignity of every person. You don't have to talk about
No.
you don't have to talk about sex or anything like that. You can just talk about the God-given dignity of another person. But as you start to understand that, then children kind of instinctively
Right.
know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And actually, that's something that all of us should know more or less by instinct, by nature, right? It's the natural law written in our hearts that we already know certain things. But when the world around us is so loudly
Right.
proclaiming something different, that voice of the
Oh,
natural
it's so
law
hard.
gets
We're
really
so good
difficult to listen to.
at talking ourselves out of things.
But if we're able to, yeah, and if we're able to, for children at a really young age, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about this in another
I'm
episode,
sure.
I think we'll talk about education and teaching kids. But if we're able to incorporate some semblance of and some understanding of the church's understanding of the human person from a very young age, then the dignity of the body and the understanding of the incarnation. So
Right.
that's the thing that makes it all click. It's the incarnation. I've said this before in homilies that there's a professor of theology who is known to begin and end every lecture with "the incarnation happened."
Right.
And then he would lecture on whatever the subject was. And then at the end of the lecture, he would stop and say, "The incarnation happened," and the bell would ring and everybody would leave.
Right.
But this idea that the incarnation is it's the crux for everything. It's the way that everything works. It's because the incarnation happened. And that's Gaudium et Spes 22. It's only in the mystery of the Word incarnate that the mystery of man is revealed.
Right.
Right? It's when we understand that God took on our human flesh, so he raised this body to a deeper dignity, even more than what we had in the beginning.
Right.
It's amazing.
And that's what I was going to say. It's that, right, you're saying to talk about theology of the body isn't to necessarily talk about sex. And the point is that, well, if they don't understand the anthropology of it, right, if they don't understand the dignity of their body because of this anthropology, this Catholic anthropology, right, they're not going to buy what we say about sex anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
it's almost like it's the wrong thing. I'm teaching health this year, and I have thought, 1,000 times at this point, like, oh, I'm going to incorporate theology of the body, and notably, I'm taking a theology of the body class at Franciscan this year as well. And
Good.
so
Nice.
it wasn't something that I was like really seeking to do. It's just I think the Lord just put it on my heart, so I was like, all right, fine. You know what I mean? You know how you respond to the Lord.
Whatever. Whatever, Lord.
But like it is only from looking into it deeper that I'm like that I have come to realize that, oh, it's not just like a sexual ethics course. That's not what that is. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like it is this, well, who are you? Who are you? You know what I mean? And then sexual ethics, that's a part of it. It is. But like if you don't give me step 1, I'm not going to buy step 8, you know? So it's like that's something that's come to my attention recently. It's edifying to hear you say the same thing.
Yeah, and then look at that though. Look what you said before about what was it that brought you to
Yeah.
Renee.
Yeah, I
It
did.
was that you thought
She was also really good at the card game
step
spit.
1.
I was like, man, this chick is so cool.
So you saw that she was she was beautiful. She was
Yeah.
skilled at a game that
Yeah.
you felt that's
And
an
it was
important game.
a
That's life
throwback
skill
from my childhood
that
too.
I
So
should
I'm
have.
sure that played a role.
Sure, because that's the game that you
Yeah.
play on
Rainy days.
like
Yeah.
at camp, at
Yeah.
summer camp. That's exactly. All right, so go back to that though, right? Because step 1 is that initial attraction that you still don't understand. You still don't fully grasp everything that there is to grasp, but it's what attracts you and gets you started. If we can present that image of the human person that's attractive and inviting, then that's going to get them. So I want to close
All
then
right.
with this really profound thought. the reason I'm interested in watching this Rings
I
of Power
thought you were going to
series-
say the incarnation was real.
No,
Oh.
I'll get to that. The reason I'm interested in watching this Rings of Power thing is because the books have been so attractive to me.
Right.
Reading Tolkien's writing has been so attractive to me. Watching the first Lord of the Rings movies was super attractive for me. I was let down by The Hobbit.
Really? I've never seen him.
I was let down by the Hobbit movies because I felt like they weren't true enough to the book.
Okay.
But I'm kind of holding out this hope that there's a return to the romance.
Wow.
Right? That there's a return to like the real thing.
Yeah.
So that's why
We
I'm
should watch
interested in
it
watching
together.
it. But I'll tell you what, if it's not looking good though, I'm turning it off.
How about
I'm
this?
going to take your advice.
We'll
just
watch
don't watch
it together,
Right?
And if it's really good, then we'll make a podcast about how it was really good. And if it's really bad, we'll turn it off and make a podcast on the spot.
Then we'll never speak of it
we'll make a
again. We'll never speak of it
No, we got to
again.
take advantage of these.
On the
Yeah.
We got to bring
I was
all the
gonna say,
equipment.
Take
and be
advantage of
there.
these fools. No, I don't know.
Yes.
Fly, you
Craziness.
fools. Did you ever seen that meme where they talk about how Gandalf
Fly,
actually said
you
that because he was telling them
fools.
to take the Eagles? They just totally missed it. Yeah. Hope it's real.
Oh man. Hey, this is The Tangent, and I'm Father Sam Kachuba.
You can catch us on Veritas on 1350 AM and 103.9 FM. Yes, I have it on a magnet right behind me.
I'm so glad.
We'll see you next time.
God bless you.